Beautiful. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. As always, we're excited to see all of you, and we're so thankful for you giving your time and precious energy to our learning together this summer. We hope that today's session is really useful for you. We're excited to fill you in on some of the things we've been researching and learning. As you know, what we're going to be talking about is formative assessment and feedback in the asynchronous lesson space. Just thinking through some strategies and tools to give timely and meaningful formative assessment and feedback in a way that feels manageable. And you'll see we're going to talk about some things that you're probably familiar with and how they can be modified slightly. And we're going to talk about some new tools as well that a lot of you probably aren't familiar with to kind of give you ideas for how you might expand the things that you do. Um, for those of you who don't know us, we know that a lot of you have attended multiple sessions, but we do know that there are people in attendance today who work at Glenbrook North or off campus or district and who might not know the two of us or what we do. So we thought we'd introduce ourselves first. I'm Marshall Harris. I'm an English teacher at South and an instructional coach. Co-presenting with me today is Matt Berkey. He teaches French in the World Language Department. He's also an instructional coach at GBS. And just so you all know, if you're unfamiliar with our program, as instructional coaches at GBS, we're teachers, we're colleagues, we're not administrators, and our role is primarily to be thinking partners for colleagues, to do some research with some of the release time we have, and then talk with colleagues about things that they want to accomplish in their classes, and then bring that research to the conversation so that they can think through with us how to best implement new ideas into the classroom. So that's what we do in a nutshell. So for people from North and off campus, we wanted to make sure you knew who we are. So as always with these sessions, we respectfully ask that you keep your mic muted. I believe we muted everybody already. So if you would keep it that's part of why we're co-hosting, is one of us can keep an eye on the chat. We ask that you unmute your mic and interrupt us, though, if you feel like it's necessary and warranted. We, of course, trust your judgment. Number 4 on this list is a new one for this session. What we'd like you to do is actually turn off your video for this session. The reason being that it can be a bandwidth issue. So we know that we're going to be clicking around into some websites, and with so many people with video going simultaneously, it can just cause things to slow down a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind turning off your video for this session, at least when you're not in breakout rooms, that'd be great. And then stick around at the end to discuss things after the presentation for 10 minutes if you want. We're going to stick around for 10 additional minutes. And if you are so inclined, you have additional questions or things that you want to talk about, we hope that you'll do that. So typical reminders, if you've been to multiple sessions, you've seen these before. Don't forget these sessions are being recorded and they'll be made available to you at a later date. At the end of the session, we'll share an attendance and feedback form with you, and the district has said to get paid for attendance, you have to fill that out. It only takes a few minutes. There are lots of other sessions coming from our office, but also from other Glenbrook offices. So keep an eye out for those, and please continue to sign up. And then we know that we can't get to everything in these sessions. We're trying to give you some ideas, some food for thought, but for additional support or for a thinking partner, make sure you go to the resources that you know are available in your building. Glenbrook South teachers, you guys know, as always, you can reach out to any of the 4 coaches, but everybody, of course, can reach out to district technology and the various resources within your buildings. So we like to start every presentation by grounding what we're going to talk about in some research, specifically John Hattie's research. If you've been to a number of sessions, we know you've heard this spiel a few times, but I'm just going to give it really quickly for those who might be in their very first session. Basically, John Hattie is a researcher who takes data from countries all over the world, thousands of classrooms, literally millions of students, and what he looks at is what he calls effect sizes. So he looks at different types of inputs into the classroom and then measures how they affect learning. He looks at all kinds of things like environmental effects, home life, socioeconomics, district affluence, spending per pupil, but he also looks at instructional strategies, which is of course our wheelhouse. And for each input, he measures the effect size according to a 0.4 scale. So basically, if an effect size is 0.4, it means that that input causes 1 year of learning in 1 year's time. If you double that, if the effect size is 0.8, that means 2 years of learning can happen in 1 year of time. So for this particular presentation, just a few that we want to draw your attention to. Number one, formative evaluation in and of itself, just checking in with kids to see how well they're understanding things, is a 0.48. So that's a slight acceleration. But then when you do things with it, for example, provide feedback based on that formative assessment, that moves learning to a 0.7. So that's close to double the rate of learning if you do that consistently and with fidelity. And then this big one is response to intervention, which is triple the rate of learning. And RTI is kind of a buzzword that's existed for a bit, but really how we want you to think about it is that when you give a formative assessment, you give kids feedback and you recognize maybe a student or multiple students are having a particularly difficult time, that presents an opportunity to respond through intervention in whatever form that might take, whether it's classroom interventions or building-wide supports, can have a huge effect size on students' pace of learning. So at this point, Matt's going to jump into just an overview of what formative assessment is.
So we all have used the term formative assessment, but we just kind of want to ground this presentation in what Hattie is talking about when he talks about formative assessment. And so formative assessment, he breaks it into 3 pieces. Students know where they are. So there's an image of the learning pit, if you look to your right, which is a term that's been going around for a little bit now, but it's basically like, I'm good because I don't know what I don't know. And then when I realize there's confusion and I'm lost and sometimes I can get frustrated, but how can I get out and feel successful? And so it's important that students know where they are in that process to reach that 0.7. How close are they to that goal? And then how can they close that gap? So how can they, by providing targeted feedback that helps them close that gap. Students also need to feel safe that they can take risks and they won't fail something because they tried something new. They need to realize that we value the mistakes, because I know as a teacher, when, my French 1 students are looking at me like, what did you just say? That helps me to change my instruction because I realize where there are issues. And then we need to spend at least as much time on formative assessment as we do on summative assessment throughout the unit. And so we made these anchoring questions to kind of focus what we were talking about and make sure that the tools all hit what we thought was important to get back to the research. And so how can kids get quality feedback quickly? How can I stay grounded in a digital home? So all of the tools we're going to talk about today can be grounded through Google Classroom. How does the teacher get information to help with the planning of the next synchronous session? And what structure works best for my discipline and/or my learning targets?
So in order to prepare for this particular session, we consulted some publishing from 2 particular universities. I don't know if you recognize these campuses, but they are both emphasizing the notion that the flipped classroom is best practice in the digital space. So that's Northwestern and Stanford. Don't know if you got those right. But the idea of the flipped classroom is that synchronous is the space for activities, conversations, collaboration, and building a sense of belonging, while the asynchronous space is the space for new content, opportunities for reflection, asynchronous discussions, and then the piece that we're talking about today, formative assessment. Now, we're not naive about this. We understand that Glenbrook students are not Northwestern and Stanford students, although some might become Northwestern or Stanford students. But still, the idea here is the same, that the best practice is to use the synchronous space for that processing together, and to use the asynchronous space for the other types of teaching and learning that you might normally do.
We also know that in this environment, in this asynchronous environment, formative assessment is going to be a lot like homework, because they're going to be doing it. Well, we don't have all the specifications of what that's going to look like at this moment, but it's going to feel a lot more like homework. So there are a couple of things that we know about homework that the research tells us. Choice is good with homework. Getting multiple avenues to be able to complete something is good for students. Clear purpose, since you're not there, how can they do this without you? Trying to differentiate the assignment so that students are able to complete the task, but in a way that still meets all of your targets, but is meaningful to them and their learning practices. Break the assignment into manageable chunks, which is not only good practice, but is also really helpful for some of our students who are in our special or who are in special ed. And then open the door for questions and make sure that you provided students with an avenue to ask those questions.
So we're going to go through 4 specific digital tools. By no means is this an exhaustive list of every digital tool that you could use. But like we said at the start, we do want to touch on 2 that we think a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with, and 2 that might be new and might push you to explore some cool and innovative options. We don't have time to get into the nuts and bolts of all 4. But we have heard in your feedback in earlier sessions that people are wanting that. We don't have the time this summer to provide a full session for each tool. For example, we've done a Paradex session during the school year that takes a full 45 minutes alone on that one tool. But what we have embedded into this PowerPoint is links to video tutorials. So we hope that you find that helpful. And when we share the PDF of the Google slide deck later, you can go back and you can click on the video tutorials that you're most interested in. So we're going to talk about Google Forms, Quiz Mode, Edpuzzle, Pear Deck, and Edulastic. As is true with every single aspect of teaching that we're talking about this summer, we do want you to be conscious of and thinking about how you frame classroom behavior expectations for kids in these 3 realms: how you want kids to act, how you want them to talk, and what you want their digital space, their video, if they're using it, to look like when they're doing this work. So just bringing that back to the forefront of your mind. So the very first of the 4 tools, as I mentioned, is Google Form Quiz Mode. And we know that a lot of you, if not nearly all of you, are familiar with Google Forms. You've either filled them out or you've created them yourselves, but you might not know Quiz Mode. And we want to make sure that you get exposed to it, because it can be a great formative assessment tool, especially in the asynchronous space. Some of the positives are that it gives both the student and you some immediate information, and it's familiar. Our kids know Google really well. They certainly fill out a lot of forms. A lot of our kids create forms, so they know the interface. The cons is that mostly it's going to give you information that's immediate about surface understanding. The most valuable use is typically going to be multiple choice questions. You can use it for other things, but that's its real strength. Another con is that it really has limited value for those non-multiple choice. You can see kids' answers, but really for them to get immediate feedback on a non-multiple choice question, it doesn't create a lot of value for that. And I'll show you why that is. So what I want to do is show you a little bit of how to create and structure a Google form quiz, what the students see, what you see, and then we could talk a little bit more about how it can be used. And right there on this slide, you can see that too fast question mark. and the video tutorial link. That's what I was referring to earlier. So I'm going to actually leave this PowerPoint for a second and show you really quickly a Google form quiz. Matt, just confirm for me really quickly. You can see the quiz?
We're good.
Okay, awesome. So what you're seeing here, it looks like a typical Google form. And the difference is twofold at the basic setting it up level. So if you go up to the gear icon here and you get to settings, over here on the right, you see quizzes. And if you turn that on, right where my cursor is moving, make this a quiz, that converts it from a form into a quiz. Now, there are other options in here, but we're not going to get into all of those today. You can learn about those in that video tutorial. But within the quiz setting, once you've created it, under each question, you then have the option to add an answer key. And so when I click on that option, I can select the answer that's correct, and I can assign points, and then I can save it. So now when kids fill out this form and they submit their answers and then they submit the completed form, they can immediately get their answer scored, and you also can see who answered in what ways and how they did. Now, this is what it looks like to kids. It just looks like a Google form. The one big difference is that each question has a point value listed. Now, when a kid, I'm going to put in some random answers here so I can show you something. I'm not really paying attention to how I'm answering, so don't judge me if these are all wrong. Kids will see that screen, and then they can click View Score, and they can see not only did what they got wrong, but they can also see the correct answer. There is an option to embed feedback that goes beyond just giving the correct answer, but that requires additional work for you on the setup side. Now, one thing I want to draw your attention to is this particular semi-open-ended question. It's just a fill-in-the-blank question, but it's asking for kids to write the word ethos. And what you might notice is that it's case sensitive, and that period that I put in, which you could imagine a lot of kids putting it in, would make their answer appear wrong. So that's one of the weaknesses I was referring to, is that when you're not using multiple choice, kids could be told something is wrong when it's in fact right. But obviously a kid who's looking at this could also see that they actually had it right. It's just it's a minor flaw. Now, in addition, let me move things here. You get a spreadsheet of the kids' answers just like you would from a Google form. So you can see in column B here, I get each kid's score. These are all fake answers that I put in. I get their answers in each column. For that ethos question where they typed in, you can see the variety of ways that kids can answer it. Technically, just that one kid would get marked right because of the capital E and the lack of period. I didn't put names here, but obviously you can put kids' names as a question, and you can also have it collect their emails if you would like to do that. So that, like I said, that's a really, really quick look at how to create it, what the students see and what you see. But really what I want to emphasize is just how it can be used. So you can imagine if kids are taking that Google quiz on their own during asynchronous space and you're watching those answers trickle in, it can really give you good information to help you plan that next synchronous session. You can identify macro misunderstandings and see like maybe there's a particular question that a lot of kids don't get, or you can also identify pockets of misunderstanding that might influence whether or not you put kids in certain kinds of small groups to work on things, and it allows you to differentiate in really cool ways. I'm going to pass it over to Matt now so that he can talk to you about Edpuzzle, but I'm also going to take a second here just to let Matt share his screen. Okay, Matt, you should be good to go. And you're muted, just so you know.
Thank you. All right. So there was a question about like test security with Google Form Quiz. And there really wouldn't be any test security with this, which is why we're talking about it in the formative assessment piece and not in the summative assessment piece, because they could text each other answers, they could screenshot, they could Google, they could use notes. So if you're just looking for a really quick snapshot of how are we doing and are you with me, that would be the best way. But I do agree with the comment of that would be a challenging tool for a summative assessment. The next tool we're going to talk about is Edpuzzle. I'm a big fan of Edpuzzle. It's a video-based platform that enables teachers to embed questions and checks for progress throughout. So you can use any video that's on YouTube or that you create and then upload it into their platform. And then through that platform, you can add questions. The platform tells you how many times the kids watched it, how far they watched the video. It breaks every video into like 10 chunks and then tells you, did they watch chunks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? And how many times they tried a question. So it gives you a lot of really good information and then keeps it all nice, neat, and clean in their grading. They have a grade book that it's not friendly to export into PowerSchool, but they do have a grade book. It's really easy for kids. So you link it to your Google Classroom, they click on a link through your Google Classroom, and they're in. So there's not a lot of thought for them, and there's not a lot of checks to make sure. It's just there. It embeds straight into Google Classroom. So again, that digital home that we've been talking about, it's not really an extra site for them. It's an extra site for you, but it's not for them. And then it has a massive library of already created content. So even for French, there are constantly videos that are up that are there. And then if the teacher has a question that I wouldn't ask, I can just delete the question. I can change the question because I can just make a copy of what is there. So even with me teaching a smaller subject area, there's still a huge amount of resources. The con is it's another website for you to check. And so you just have to be cognizant of that and what your workflow is. So I'm going to show you 3 things when it comes to Edpuzzle. How can you find and create content? How can you edit existing content? And then how is this providing feedback to students? Again, if I'm explaining this too fast, I've added a tutorial where someone walks you through all of this again that you can pause and do at your own pace. So here we go. Edpuzzle. So you'd log in. And it would be here. And this is kind of what your homepage would look like. You also have classes, and so you can invite classes or you can see like Français 1, that's exactly from my classroom, from my Google Classroom. So good to go. So if I want to create content, I could just search for something. You see there are trends in world languages. There are what the world language teachers are using at Glenbrook South. So I can see what my colleagues or team members are doing, and I can pull something from them. I can see what's trending just in world languages in general. Oh, look, I could learn the names of clothes in French. All I would do is I would say, yeah, I want this one, and I would copy it. And then now it's mine. And I can edit, I can ask questions, I can do all of those things in here. And so if I wanted to edit, I could see this person didn't ask any questions. They just threw the video up here. So I could ask a multiple choice question. And then all I would do is type in my multiple choice question, type in my answers, and we're good to go. And I can just keep doing that, and I can move the question wherever it needs to be. Oop. I can move the question wherever I want it to be, and I can have as many questions as I would like. I can also voice over, so I can speak. If there's a part that I know about this video that's going to be either cause misunderstanding or it's going to be confusing to students, I can add a recording on top of it, which is awesome. The only thing I don't like about it is the video is still playing. So I'm adding my voice on top of the video, especially for my discipline. That would get very challenging with kids trying to listen in a different language. And then you cut. I can short, like let's say the video really doesn't start talking about what I want it to for the first 3 minutes. I can cut at the beginning or I can cut at the end to just really target. The unfortunate thing is I can't cut in the middle. So I can't take something out of the middle. I can just make it shorter from the beginning or from the end. So, and then I would just hit finish. And now I have this assignment that I can assign to my class through here that is then linked to Google Classroom. And I can, so hopefully my kids might be getting a lot of random emails in the summer. But here we go. I can post it now on Google Classroom. I could just share the assignment and give them the link. So there are a couple of ways that I can do all of that. And then let's say that what I want is not up there. So let's say that the content that I want doesn't exist right now on Edpuzzle. I can take any YouTube link I want. So let's say, maybe, I want to talk about how Stromae was at the South by Southwest Festival. I can grab this video. I just cut and copy the link. And then I can throw it up here. And now that video has been pulled into Edpuzzle. And I can add questions, voice over, cut the video down. So anything that's on YouTube can be pulled into Edpuzzle. And then as well, I can make my own content. So if I made a screencastify of something and I want the students to answer questions, I want to hold them responsible for part of my lecture. I'm explaining a new math concept, and I know that when I get to the third step of the quadratic, that the kids start to get confused. I can stop the video and ask a question. And all I would do is add content, and I can pull anything in from Google Drive as well. So there are ways that I can do it not only with pre-created content, but with also content that I am creating specifically for my students. And
can I interrupt you for a second? There are a bunch of great questions in the chat that colleagues are answering, people with experience. One question asked was about licensing. Do you know if the district has committed to the pro license through January 21, or if it's just South?
It's just South.
So North and off-campus teachers, just so you know, we've heard that the best avenue to ask for additional or extended licensing is to talk to your IS, your immediate supervisor, and chat with them about your desire to use a particular tool, and they will advocate on your behalf. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you, Marshall. And then when I come in here, what I really like is, here, wait, let me go back. I can come in here, and then I can see how well the students did on the questions. And then I can see how much of the video they watched. So Daniel only watched 90% of the video and got the very last question wrong because he didn't watch it. And so I'm able to see all of that data right in front of me. And I can even come back and see how many times they watched a section. So Amelia got the second question wrong. and she watched that section twice. So she really was struggling with that piece of the video, and that's where her misconception was. And so it really drills down the data, and so I can see what's happening. And for a 1.5-minute video, she spent 3 minutes working on that. So there's some really good data. The kids get immediate answers to their multiple choice questions, and then you as a teacher have to go in and grade the non-multiple choice questions. And it just kind of like looks like this, and you add a check mark. And so it's really quick, easy. They get immediate feedback except for open-ended questions, and you can do it with almost anything. And so that is Edpuzzle in a nutshell.
Sorry, I was muted. Matt, do you, one question that's in there, do you happen to know the access code or the code for full access off the top of your head, or where people can find it?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I have a meeting with Cam about that, though. So if you're a South teacher and you want access to that, email me, mberkey at 1225, and then I'm going to find out the answer, and I can get back to you.
All right. Edpuzzle's so cool. Thanks for explaining that, Matt. That's really, I love that tool. So Pear Deck is the next one we want to talk about. And we know a lot of you are familiar with Pear Deck, but not everybody is. And some people have heard of it, but haven't used it. So we wanted to talk about it and what it is at its core, in case you've never really heard about it or heard much about it. It's an add-on to Google Slides that just lets you check students' thinking and understanding during direct instruction. So if Edpuzzle is kind of the video version of that, right? Like you can insert checks for understanding in a video, Pear Deck is kind of the way to do that if you have an existing Google slideshow, or if you want to create one that you want kids to go through during asynchronous time on their own. And then you can insert checks for understanding within that Google slide deck. Matt, if you go to the next one, thanks. So some pros, it goes right into Google Slides. Lots of kids know it. Even if you've never used it, chances are they've been in classes where it's been used. It gives you really good macro and micro, so full class info and kid by kid info. And there's a diversity of the types of questions you can ask. And it's a nice way to increase engagement when you want kids to go through some direct instruction from you that otherwise might drag on. Not that any of you would ever lecture in a way that drags on. I'm sure you're all very engaging, but once in a while, a Pear Deck slide can help. So some cons is that giving immediate feedback in the asynchronous space just requires some ongoing monitoring of what kids are submitting, which can just be a little bit annoying, but it's not the end of the world. It's a minor con. So part of what's cool about Pear Deck is that it can offer opportunities for different types of questions and answers. So you can ask kids to draw, you can ask kids to drag icons, you can ask them to answer multiple choice questions or answer with numbers or with text. And I'm just going to show you some examples of what that looks like for kids in particular. So here's a map. This is a kind of a one Pear Deck slide option. You could use any image. The map is just an example. But I could ask kids, let's say I'm in the middle of a lecture about geography or a history lesson that involves mentioning multiple locations, and I want them to answer this question really quickly. I can have them draw on the slide, and they can circle the places they most want to visit. I love that this question is about next summer, because hopefully we will all be able to travel next summer. That would be really nice. But that's just one example of a slide. They could draw on this, and you can see on your end the collection of answers and each individual kid's answers to get a sense of what they're thinking or how they're feeling. We'll look at the next one. This is a straightforward algebra question, right? But you could ask kids to write out and show their work while they're going through the direct instructions. So let's say you're delivering a lecture about how to isolate a variable. I'm an English teacher, but I think that's a thing, isolating a variable. And you wanted to pause in that instruction and give them an opportunity to try this very basic question. Each kid on their own individual slide could write out their process for solving it, and then you again could see all of their answers. This next example, just a really easy true false. Kids could use this slide to give you a quick indication of their understanding on an relatively straightforward true false question. We'll cruise to the next one. This is another, so we looked at drawing slides and the true false. This one could involve dragging or drawing. So kids could have their own icons and they could drag over to how they're feeling at this point in a particular lecture using Google Slides. And then you would know, you could maybe end asynchronous Google slide deck with this, and then that would inform how kids were feeling for you before you started the next synchronous session. Let's take a look at one more, I think. You can also use really open-ended questions, right? So you could ask a question like this. Obviously, this question is geared towards teachers, but you can ask a really open-ended question in a Pear Deck slide, and kids could type long form answers. You could ask them for paragraphs. They could submit them, and then you'll see those trickle in, and you can take a look at how they're feeling, where they are in their level of understanding and thinking before you get to that next synchronous session. Matt, if you would go to the next one. Two really important features about Pear Deck in the asynchronous space as opposed to using it in class that you should be aware of, especially if you're a veteran Pear Deck user. It does have a student pace mode. So typically in class, you would be running the pace. Kids would be seeing what you want them to see all at the same time on their Chromebooks, and they would be answering questions using their Chromebooks while you're projecting what you want them to see on the screen. In student pace mode, they operate the slide deck at their own pace, just like it's indicated in the name. Now, we're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of how you do that, but in those video tutorials, Pear Deck has a bunch of really great, short, easy to follow video tutorials, and one of them on the page that's linked here takes you through how to do student paced mode. The other thing that's available in the asynchronous space is that you can give feedback to kids digitally. So if you are monitoring their interaction with the Pear Deck slides, you can give them feedback really easily by clicking on their answers and then following up. Now, in the in-person session, you're most likely giving that feedback out loud to the class. But if you're running this in an asynchronous space, you can give teacher feedback to kids digitally. And there's also a video about how you do that in the video tutorials. So those are really, really helpful. I encourage you, whether you're a brand new Pear Deck user or a veteran who just needs to learn a few things about using it in the asynchronous space, there's video tutorials in there that can really help you. We've got one more tool to go, and Matt is going to take you through Edge Elastic.
So the last tool we're going to talk about today is a tool called Edge Elastic. You might not have heard of it. I hadn't really heard of it before. And the reason I got to Edge Elastic is a lot of North teachers have been talking about Floop EDU, which I had not heard of. And so I was researching Floop. But Floop is going to cost about $100 a year starting in the next school, or starting in August. And so then my next thought was, well, if there's a chance district won't pay for that for south because we already have some tools, and so what else could we look at that would have some of the similar features? And running across that, I found this tool called EdgeElastic. And so EdgeElastic is a feedback-based assessment tool where teachers and students can instantly measure progress on questions and watch progress on specific standards over time. And so it's a huge data collection tool that gives instant feedback to students and has a huge bank of questions as well. So it's really robust and provides some of the things that Fluke does, but they have pledged to always be free for individual teachers. So EdgeElastic is really, again, it's easy for students. You can connect it to your Google Classroom, and again, it's easy for students to reach out to and to use as a tool. It is a little bit more challenging as an educator to use. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but they also have a lot of great tools to explain everything, and you only need to look at what you need to know. It measures everything, and it tracks all of the data and gives you trackable data from the macro down to the very micro level, and it has a giant library of usable content. The con is it must be tied to a standard. Every question has to be tied to a standard, which that's not necessarily a con, but the only courses or the only subject areas that they currently have standards for are English, math, social studies, and science. So this is not a tool that I could use as a world language teacher. This is not a fine arts tool. So it has to be in one of those 4 core areas. But that's okay. I kept doing some research and looking in for all of you, even though I'm not going to be using this tool. And I do really think that it's got some really robust things and some things that other tools just aren't able to do. So I'm going to talk to you about how to find and create content, how to find different question types, and then what the mastery reports look like and what the information they can give you. Again, there's no way I'm going to be able to explain this tool well enough for anybody to be able to use it perfectly. I'm just going to give you enough information to know if you're interested or not in this tool. This is a tutorial. It's an hour. You do not need to watch the whole hour to understand it. You can fast forward and skip all kinds of stuff in here, but it's all there. So you come in, you've got your dashboard. This is linked again to my Google Classroom. And I can create assignments and assign assignments to them in here and manage my classroom. Here's where I can create a new assessment. And I will just go into this random assessment. Oh, that's not doing what I want it to do. Okay, here we go. Let's just do it this way. New assessment. I'm going to create the assessment. So then I come in and I can search for just about anything. So let's say I teach physics and I want to talk to everybody about friction. Here are a bunch of questions already made and already tied to standards that talk about friction and even have graphs that I can use, mathematical equations, so that I can have the students practice what we've been talking about in class, but I'm not trying to make all the content. I'm just using the content that's already there. And then I can even, and then all I do is I add that, and now it's added to what I'm going to be giving students. I can change the standard. So the standards are over here. So if I'm doing science and I want standards, there's NGSS standards. It's tied to the ACT. There's some of them that are tied to AP exams. So we've got the AP. I can just search just specifically for AP so that I can tie them to AP standards. I can tie them to the SAT. So within those content areas, I can actually have a pretty robust look at and deeper dive into those specific standards and then measure students as we move throughout the year. And then, so I can do something that's as simple as that to something that's even, I could just do, I can go to the library here, and I can find just content that's already existed before. So maybe I'm giving a test on oh. Well, now it's not working. It worked earlier today. But you can go into the library and you can search, and it will give you things that people have already. Oh, that's why. There we go. All right, I'm sorry. I'm setting too many filters and trying to talk to all of you at the same time. And now I can just pull a Macbeth test that people have been getting and see. So I can pull just questions to I can pull an entire assessment that someone else has created, and I can go through and edit all of that as well. And then I can even just create specific questions for my students. So I want to author a new question, and I'm a math teacher, and I want to do this on a graph, but I don't know how to use a graph. I could click that little help button, and it's going to explain to me right now just how to create a graph placement question. So all of these little question marks, you click on there, and there's a video that explains how to create just that specific question type. But if I'm going to do some graph placement, it's pretty simple. I can just drag, and then I can make my own graph to copy things that are like in the textbook. So maybe you've got the textbook and you really like a question. Maybe you're making your own question, and you want students to see things or to and calculate and do what you would want them to do. Maybe
Matt, I don't know if you can hear me, but your sound is going in and out.
that involves you can do graphing, you could do multiple choice, you can drag and drop, you can create just multiple choice questions, you can plot on a line, plot on a graph. So it's got a lot in there that's fairly easy to use, and even simpler for the students, that gives them that immediate feedback that we could give in the classroom when we're walking around. And even if we are in the classroom, but maybe we're uncomfortable walking around or approaching, and we hover over students, and maybe when we're back if we go back in the fall and we're not comfortable doing that, this could be a tool that would give us all of those same answers while limiting our movement in the classroom, or if we're not there as well. So, and then when you come in to look at the results, it tells you how many students are doing well, how many are just doing satisfactory, and how many are doing poor. It breaks it down by question. It breaks it down over the length of the school year to show you how they're doing within that particular bandwidth of that standard. So it's really robust and really gives you a lot of data. And then it shows you questions too. So 90% of students got this question wrong. And it really gives you data in a really manageable and very visually quick to see format, and provides a ton of resources to kind of push that out there. So that's why I thought that tool was interesting, and could be something that we could use for feedback, and is completely free.
Matt, some questions that came up. Jenny Freeman was asking if you can create your own standards or if you have to use the standards that are embedded.
You have to use the standards that are embedded. They will embed your standards if you, as a district, buy it. But as an individual teacher, they've guaranteed that it will be free for you, but you have to use their standards.
Another question, does it allow students to make a graph as well?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't think that would be a thing, so I didn't check.
Okay, so we would need to explore that. Just so you know, Matt, your sound cut out for a minute, but so I just wanted to say to everybody, when we put the recording of this particular session up, we're going to run it again later in the summer. So we'll post that second running of it so that that part where Matt's sound ran kind of was having an issue, you'll be able to hear those details more clearly there.
Sorry about that, everybody.
No problem.
All right. So, small breakout groups. So we're going to put everybody into small breakout groups. So just so you can talk about what ideas from this presentation could work in your classroom. Do you have any further questions about what we shared today that maybe someone else in your group could answer? Or you can call us in at the bottom. You'll see an ask for help button, and we can come in there. And then do you have tools, different tools than what we presented that maybe would be helpful to your colleagues as they're talking and asking questions?